So now I just want to talk about some things that helped inspire this comic beyond just other people's comics. Beyond comics, I mean. So other mediums, other projects. It's a fairly long list. So I think the most obvious one, based on the name, the Unbreakable Argonauts, is going to be Greek mythology. Not just Greek mythology, but other cultures' mythologies. So Norse mythology, I want to play a role in these series, assuming we can turn it into a series. English mythology, elements of African mythology, and maybe Egyptian mythology. Mythological stories, I think, were kind of the original epic, fantastical stories. And I just think there's a lot to learn from them. I find them just endlessly interesting. So including those was I think a foregone conclusion for me. So after mythology, I'd say one of the interesting things about the comic is that a lot of the fight sequences are actually kind of choreographed around music. So not when I write, but when I'm thinking up a story, when I'm thinking up a scene, I'll listen to music and I'll kind of choreograph and take notes from that. It helps kind of build up a scene in my head like a music video. And so a lot of the time I'll listen to a song by one of my favorite singers and the scene just kind of comes to me. Actually, the backup was written almost exclusively based on the I forget the name. It's Vide Cor Meum, I think it's called. It's used in Hannibal and it's used in Kingdom of Heaven. Really great piece of music, and hopefully we make enough money so that we can, first of all, get funded, but hopefully we make enough that we can make a backup story and I can bring in that. But yeah, Meatloaf songs helps choreograph a lot of the action sequences. So songs like Bat Out of Hell, actually Bat Out of Hell is what I listen to come up with the choreography for the end fight sequence, which is probably the comic's most kind of epic fight sequence. So you got motorbikes in there, you got Cold War planes doing dogfights in the sky, you got shootouts, you got fist fights, all that stuff. And that's just going to be fantastic when it's done. Next up, I would say just adventure films in general. So Indiana Jones really kicked off my love of the adventure genre in the film. And then after that, I just kind of, just scoured DVD stores and video stores for adventure films. So things like The Librarian movies, even older things like Romancing the Stone, and what's that one with Chuck Norris? No, I don't know. But it's there's a half decent Chuck Norris adventure movie, and just things like that. And of course, Brendan Fraser's The Mummy. I think Brendan Fraser as Rick O'Connell is kind of the modern, kind of archetypal, mortal human hero. And I think that character definitely influenced some of the characters that I wrote. After that, I'd say, what else would I say? Definitely the classic kind of pulpy comic books that I've already mentioned. So Challenges of the Unknown, I think, is a fantastic series. I think Kirby I think created the Challenges of the Unknown. At least I think he did. So you got Challenges of the Unknown, and those guys are just, I think, kind of on par with what I want from the Unbreakable Argonauts, but to have a little bit more individuality. And, the idea that these guys are superheroes in their own right. So if they're not as a team, they're off having solo adventures, they're off doing, double team ups and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's what I say about, and as I've already mentioned, Dark Horse's Indiana Jones series. Those are absolutely fantastic. And if you like Indiana Jones, then I think hunting down those mini-series is definitely worth it. Especially things like The Fate of Atlantis, The Golden Fleece, and those kinds of stories. So I definitely recommend those. A lot of the stuff that Boom has going on right now as well. or that had in recent years with their licensed comics. Things like Escape from New York, the sequel comic. It was fantastic. Kong on the Planet of the Apes was absolutely epic, especially all the voyage of them going to find Kong. There was some excellent artwork, and yeah, it's those kinds of adventures that I really like. You know, sending your heroes off into the great unknown, and just throwing everything that your imagination can at them. It goes without saying that the Justice Society was very influential, especially the Jeff Johns era, and then you had the 2007 series where it was Jeff Johns, and then he kind of passed the torch on to like Bill Willingham and James Robinson, and that whole era was just wonderful. Those are kind of my favorite comics. Probably, I have two eras that are really my favorite in terms of to read. So I think the Golden Age was fantastic for creativity and stories, but not the best comics to go back and read. Just in part because they're very, obviously limited by the time, and so you go back and a lot of the pages are very static and very wordy, and But a lot of the modern comics that are kind of callbacks to the Golden Age. So Darwin Cook's New Frontier, as I mentioned already, the JSA. Anytime they do silent challenges, all that stuff is just absolutely wonderful. But the two eras that I really like reading the most are the Bronze Age. So about, what is that, like 1972 to 1985. Bronze Age is absolutely fantastic. The 80s were fantastic. And then kind of that sort of 1998 to about 2010 of DC Comics. Probably my favorite kind of decade of comics is from, it's 12 years, but from about 1998 to 2010. Wasn't a huge fan of the New 52. I was kind of casually reading comics during the New 52, like picking them up as I saw them, but was never really thrilled with what I was reading. I think in part because at that time I didn't know that they wiped the whole slate clean, and so I was reading these comics where they were re-establishing things, and why isn't Superman below us at the moment? Why is he with Wonder Woman? That doesn't make sense. I'm getting completely sidetracked. Also, back to music for a second. Meatloaf's Seize the Night actually inspired an entire, not this comic, but inspired an entire different comic that maybe I'll put out on Indiegogo someday, which is pretty fantastic. It's very epic. It's very one of those stories that, as you kind of think about it, that it's going to need to be 100 pages. So that's probably going to be something that I'll do a lot later, maybe once I've built up a bit of a portfolio and a following, so you guys can trust that the quality is there and that the comics are good and worth reading. Ultimately, I think it's my reading experience of current comics that drove me to make a comic, and just the ongoing feeling of reading comics that will tee up these really great ideas and these really great concepts, but then they won't follow through with them. And I just really wanted to make a comic where people could pick it up and they could reliably know that every comic is going to deliver, it's going to follow through on what it promises. But also having a good balance of the different genres. And so, as I said before, each of the heroes on the team, not each of them, but about each of them, represents a different type of comic. And so you've got Mandrake, which is the soldier guy, obviously war, action, kind of Punisher meets Sergeant Rock. And then you've got the Raven, who's this Midnighter-looking character, really classic pulpy, that kind of hero. Kind of like Doc Savage, maybe, if he wore a costume. Aurelius, the gorilla, kind of classic science fiction. And also an obvious callback to the 50s, because, what is a 50s comic if not a gorilla on the cover? Dynamo, which is the woman speedster. Probably more of a I think if any of the characters was going to be a slice of life character, it'd probably be her. I'm not going to write slice of life comics because they're not my thing, and I think that if I wrote a comic that I didn't enjoy writing, it would show through. The Rocketeer kind of character, Crimson Eagle, kind of speaks for himself. I think is this kind of larger than life hero of the skies. If you like Sky Captain, if you like obviously the Rocketeer, if you like those types of characters, definitely inspired by those. Phantasma, I think, is going to be the most interesting character to write because he's kind of halfway between Spectre and Deadman. So he doesn't have the dour personality of Spectre, but he's a bit more powerful than Deadman as well. And his whole thing is that he kind of influences people towards justice. So he can't possess people outright, but he can influence their actions, and the more susceptible that they are to him, the more he can influence their actions. And so, let's say you were like an assassin, he could probably influence you to assassinate someone else, maybe. Not that he would, because he's a superhero. But it's that kind of influence of your mind. And then Thunderman, which is, I think, what I'm going to call him. I'm kind of torn between a few names of the guy at the back, which is kind of this classic, stereotypical superhero, cape and symbol and everything. He's more of the power set of Owlman, or maybe a kind of mid-level Golden Age Superman. He's not the type of hero who can lift the Titanic, but he's the type of hero who could maybe lift a car, clean over his head. And so I think there's a really nice mix, and I think everything is complementary to each other. And I think it really works well to establish its own universe. And I think that if you guys give Unbreakable Argonauts a shot over on Indiegogo, I think you'll be very, very happy with it. And I think you'll be very happy with the universe that comes out of it as well. So hopefully that's, sheds a little bit of light on the inspirations behind the comic. And yeah, I just really hope you enjoy it. And link will be in the description.